is to stay true to your DNA. Don't look and say, okay, what's trending right now? Let me add that to, like, let me change my direction. Let me change this. Let me change my packaging. And if one retailer says, you don't fit in, well, then maybe it's not the right retailer. Unless it's your goal. If your goal, for example, is to go in Sephora, which is a great retailer, and then you may want to cater products to that retailer. Like, for example, Tatcha is a skincare brand that I'd launched at Barneys, amazing brand. But then they were also able to say, okay, well, we had this higher end at Barneys. What can I cater at Sephora and focus? So I think you have to be able to listen to both retailers and the customer and see how you can fill that hole, actually.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the next episode of the Beauty and the Brand podcast. I'm so excited to have Bettina O'Neill here today. She's the SVP of Business Development, Merchandising, and Wholesale at Scentbird since 2020. She has over 20 years of beauty and fragrance industry experience, having worked for renowned retailers like Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, and Barneys. And during her tenure as VP DMM at Barneys, she spearheaded the launch of the niche fragrance category. This included brands such as Frederic Malle, Le Labo, and Byredo. Fun fact, I pitched Bettina many times at Barneys, ultimately didn't get the brand in there. We did end up at Sephora, but I was always like, Bettina. And she probably doesn't even remember that I was pitching her all the time, but it's full circle. So excited to have you here, Bettina. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I have to remember what brand that was.
Yeah, Numatera. It was our fragrance brand that we had for over 10 years. We ultimately sold it in Sephora stores, but
probably
Barneys was definitely up there in our goals. So we're going to dive right in to some questions that we have. And I'm excited for the session because obviously fragrance is a huge passion of mine, but also because you really know this industry, I think, better than anyone. And you have your pulse on fragrance trends, what has worked for brands, what hasn't worked for brands. So you have this 360 view on the industry. So can you share, before we get into all that, can you share your journey and some key milestones that led you to become an expert in the fragrance space, particularly like your experiences at Barneys, New York, and how that kind of shaped your approach to developing niche brands as you went into Scentbird?
Absolutely. Well, I always had a love for the category. I would go into stores and go into the cosmetic department, and just the smell and everything was just like this hope in a jar, whether it was a fragrance or skincare, makeup. It just felt like magic. So I always loved it more than anything else, actually. And I actually sold behind the counter. That's how I started many moons ago. And I also loved making people feel better about themselves. I always loved putting makeup on people and kind of selling to the skeptic. That was also one of my passions. I went to FIT for cosmetic marketing and product development. And I've been a mentor there for many years. It's a great establishment, a great school.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And a fun fact, it also dates me, but Annette Green was my mentor, and she was she's such a legend, such an amazing individual. So she also steered my career quite a bit. I would say going from FIT, I was in Macy's. I worked in the store line and always in cosmetics as a manager. So from a Macy's and Neiman Marcus. So I think it's learning all the different perspective. Like I learned it from being firsthand selling to then managing people and brands. And then I think then going into more of the buying office and the merchants where I was at Saks and also at Barneys. It was just taking it full circle and really feeling comfortable being able to talk to everybody from the customer, the sales associate, and to the brand.
I love that. And I find that it's so valuable for founders to have and for experts in the industry to have that experience at the counter. And some of the best, ultimately professionals and founders that have worked in that capacity, have such a more appreciation and empathy for the end user and for the products and just the industry itself. So I love that you started that way. Now tell us a little bit more about like your Barneys experience. What strategies did you use at Barneys to successfully develop their niche fragrance market? And I have a little bit of follow-up question.
Oh, sure. Well, Barneys was an amazing experience. I was there about 16 years, from 2020 to 2016, and worked with such amazing people. And it was, really learning from people who ran fashion, Judy Collinson, Julie Gilhard, and Simon Doonan, and all those people. It was always about select, don't settle, really the edit, discovery. So our customer was truly unique compared to the other retailers that I'd worked for. So I kind of mirrored what we did in fashion, because we definitely cherry picked. We didn't just take what was given to us. So, and looking at that we had a smaller footprint, even though beautiful, it wasn't the same size as other department stores. So saying, okay, well, let's just focus on the brands that are exclusive that no one else can get. And that seemed to really work. And the customer gravitated and respected it. Like, for example, I think at the time it was Creed was our number one, and it was L'Artisan Parfumer and Nicotal. And those were like the initial pillars in the early 2000s. And then from there, I was able to get some, as we talked about, some really amazing brands that later became giants in the industry.
Yeah, and for those of you listening who may not be familiar with Barneys, it was a sort of iconic, sophisticated retail. I would say like boutique department store. That's probably the best way I would explain it. And if you wanted something really exclusive and really unique and different, that was curated, you would go to Barneys. So perfect parlay into, how can emerging fragrance brands and beauty brands apply the strategies that you use to curate the collections to differentiate themselves in a crowded market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And talking about the brands that launched was like Frederic Malle, Byredo, Le Labo, those brands which became, huge, multi-million-dollar businesses today. I would say, Barneys is also very unique because all the merchants and the leadership team believed in brands. So it was about the brand itself. We would support the brands if they needed help, because a lot of the brands, they don't have the funding, but they have a great idea. So I think it's really finding someone who really believes in your brand. So if there is such a retailer today that is truly passionate about your brand and wants to, give you some more love and exposure, I would definitely go with them, even if they're not maybe your first choice, because it's always important to have someone who is, in your backyard or your cheerleader. I would definitely say. As far as the brands themselves, to really differentiate themselves, is to stay true to your DNA. Don't look and say, okay, what's trending right now? Let me add that to, let me change my direction. Let me change this. Let me change my packaging. And if one retailer says, you don't fit in, well, then maybe it's not the right retailer.
Right.
Unless it's your goal. If your goal, for example, is to go in Sephora, which is a great retailer, and then you may want to cater products to that retailer. Like, for example, Cha-Cha is a skincare brand that I'd launched at Barneys, amazing brand. But then they were also able to say, okay, well, we had this higher end at Barneys. What can I cater at Sephora and focus? So I think you have to be able to listen to both retailers and the customer and see how you can fill that hole, actually.
Yes. And kind of moving forward with like Scentbird, you actually helped them build their subscriber rate up to 700,000. And you've been able to, it's actually the largest fragrance sampling subscription company in the world right now. So you have this very vast view on indie, niche, luxury, and designer fragrances right now. So as you're sort of looking and considering bringing in new brands, what's standing out for you right now?
Sure. It's a great question. And I will say it's very different from being at Barneys, which was like the 1% customer.
Yes, yes.
It's having Scentbird, it's great because we're able to cater to everyone, as you mentioned. And
Mm.
I would say about 60% of our customer are millennial. So really also learning that customer, and also obviously the Gen
Mm-hmm.
Z and then the Alpha. So that's learning their spending patterns, their trends.
Yes.
I mean, as we know, social, TikTok, that really trends, many things. I will say, I've also discovered that our customer, they're into sampling. They just want lots of samples, and they don't really care about, I want a full size 100 ml because I'm going to, save money on it. They
Mm.
just want variety. I think
Mm.
it's just great for all of us to hear in the industry because we're always making fragrances, but
Yes.
they prefer smaller sizes and as many as possible.
Okay, so smaller sizes, and then so obviously variety, and even like probably mixing scent is
Yes.
part of that. Part of
Yes,
that,
layering.
selection and playing with fragrance. So they're obviously in that play zone. But I'm sure, like in that process of discovering new fragrances, they probably will get like a full size of like their signature scent or something they really, really
Yes.
love. So tell me more. You're probably seeing the behind the scenes with some of these brands. What you know, what scalable strategies have you implemented to grow? Number one, to grow and diversify the product lines, and what advice would you give to small brands looking to scale?
That's a great question. Well, what we look for a brand, and I did that as wherever I was a merchant, was
Yeah.
quality. Obviously, it has to be something that you feel. It doesn't have to be my personal favorite, but I have to know that this is right for our customer. And since our customer's so vast, we can have something that's like a pink sugar Michel Germain, that's more that fruity floral,
Mm,
all the way to a more niche oudy Initio Parfums Privé, Oud for Greatness, and still have people loving it. Just happen to be different customers.
mhm.
So I think what's really interesting today that we do have that vast. The trends are very vast. It's going from it was skin scent, and it's going to like the body mist. So
Mhm,
and hair and
mhm.
body mist is very light. But then
Yes.
it's also going to beast mode, which is the other extreme. And
Yeah.
then you have young boys who are in their teens who are
Yes.
investing $300-$400 on a Parfums de Marly and a Creed, and
Mhm.
because they saw it on TikTok. And so it's a very different market that I've ever experienced. But
Yeah.
it's fun. I would say, I mean, for a brand, social is very important. And I will say
Mm.
that's where at Scentbird, we definitely help with that, because when we take on a brand, we definitely want to give the sample out, the fragrance out to customers. So it's about fragrance discovery. I think
Mhm.
that's one of the hardest things, is getting a sample in the right person's hand. That's always
Yes.
been the challenge.
And how do you
And
handle that?
well, it's amazing because that's what really sold me on Scentbird, because I remember being a merchant and I'd ask brands for like tens of thousands of samples, and I wanted deluxe. I didn't even want their VOCs. I wanted a deluxe, and I wanted them in my bag. And brands would ask, "Oh, well, do I get the customer information?" No. Like, do I get? No. Well, of course not. Like, you just get the honor of being in my bag, of course,
Right, right,
and
right,
we'll take a picture of it. The difference with Scentbird, it's really that smart sampling, that we don't lose the customer. The
Mm,
customer, because we do all this marketing, especially when we're launching a brand, and that's actually our most coveted and our best open rate, is when we put all our emails out or our social about new arrivals. Everyone wants to see what's new.
yes, of
So
course.
they will add them to their queue if it sounds interesting. We also have a quiz, so based upon your answers, we'll make suggestions to you as far as
Yes.
your scent profile. So that could be something more niche. It could also be something that is actually more designer, just based upon the actual fragrance profile. So based upon that, the customer chooses the fragrance, we call it their queue, and they could
Mm,
fill it up to, I don't know how many years they could just fill their queue up, and every month they get a new fragrance, and it's a good size, it's 8 ml, so it's a decent size for the customer to try to know if they're going to like it
mm,
or not, and they have the ability to add two, three, four, whatever they would like to. So what's great about this, we also, because we do all the social, we do all this other type of marketing, we do IG lives. We also have a podcast that we have called Scent World
mm.
that we also interview brand partners. So we get all of this exposure, and the customer trying the fragrance. So doing all that together really helps the brand to to create a demand, not only for the end consumer, but also for a retailer. Because I know today, because I was also on the brand side, the retailers look and say, well, how many followers do you have? Is anyone interested in you? Because people, and I don't fault the merchants because everyone's so busy, but you're really on your own. You have to kind of do your own work.
Yes.
You have to invest yourself. You can't expect any retailer to do anything for you. That's not going to happen today.
I want to put a pin in that because I think that's really important. Some founders who may not be familiar with or have experience with retail, with wholesale, imagine that when they get partnered with that retailer is going to put them on the map and, bring all the sales in for them or the audience for them. It's actually the opposite. It's you as the founder, you as the brand really need to build up that audience to drive that traffic to make that wholesale partnership successful. And I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding there that it's good to kind of put a pin in for those that are listening. And actually piggybacking on what you just said, Bettina. So when you can't create demand, and this is a question for you with all your vast experience in merchandising, when you can't create demand or when a brand can't create that demand, what have you found have been sort of the key reasons for that?
Often the brand's not listening. Like whether it's feedback from a buyer or retailer or customer feedback. I mean, I think reviews are so important. That's something we also provide at Scentbird. The customer will definitely write a review. The ones you generally write are the ones who love or hate, so you usually don't get so much in between. But I think it's really taking that feedback, and you may not like it, and because it's your baby, but I think to hear it, and especially if things aren't working. If you keep doing the same thing over and over, I think they say, isn't that something insanity? You keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So I think that's where you have to be open. And I think also talking to industry experts and, a really good resource, especially for fragrance, is Linda Levy from the Fragrance Foundation. She's been a real pioneer on the niche category that I've seen with many of these founders and brands, and she gives great advice. But I mean, I'm always happy to speak to brands as well and give them advice.
Actually, the flip side of that, the flip question to that is, in your experience, in the breadth of your experience, the niche brands that ultimately made it. So we have the brands like DS Durga, Frederic Malle. What did they do well in order to help them get there, particularly like in those early stages?
Yeah, that's a great question. They actually, they don't compromise on their brand. Like they have a very strong DNA, they have a very strong vision, and they are not going to compromise no matter, what someone says in that respect. They may have to compromise on other things, but never their product or their assortment or their vision. And they also are there for the long haul. They're not saying, "Oh, I want to sell this brand tomorrow," or "I want to, do this or that for this particular retailer." They're just thinking with their brand, how do I make it better? How do I get it out there? And they enjoy it. They really have a true passion, and that's what you really see. And then
that's a good point.
And then at some point, someone will say, "Hey, that's really great what you're doing. I'd love to be part of that." And that's when it comes out. So I would say brands having patience, which is not easy, and you need to have a kitty. Like you have to figure out how much you're going to invest because you don't necessarily make money, out the gate. I think the big thing today, though, also everyone needs to really focus on their own website and D2C, because in the past it was always about, let me get in a retailer, they're going to give us this big order, we're going to put everything there. And I really think, obviously, with everything happening to COVID, everyone was shopping online, and brands were really forced to do their own website. And obviously, you have better margins. You can express yourself properly. I mean, you can still obviously be part of the retailer, and the retailer respects. They know that you have your own website. If you don't, then they're kind of worried actually if you don't have it.
Of course. So, okay, you touched on something that I want to go a little bit deeper on. So you mentioned on one hand, brands listening, to the, what that retailer is giving them feedback on, right? But you had also mentioned not compromising. The brands that were successful, they didn't compromise. So what does that actually look like? More specifically, if you can give examples or,
Sure.
What does it look like never compromising versus brands that do compromise?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm thinking of Frederick Mahl, who I adore him. He's brilliant, and brought him into Barneys in, I think it was 2002. And it was very interesting. I'm sure you know, he was the first to recognize perfumers. That was a new concept.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't talk about perfumers. But it was also interesting, he also made his fragrances a much higher price. And he obviously used very, great ingredients, but also his packaging was top of the line. He also wanted to make his fragrances different prices based upon the ingredients, which that was new.
Yes.
And that was something I was challenging, because I'm like, well, and him and we obviously went back and forth, and he won on that. He won most times, I will say, because he's brilliant. But the customers got it, and it was actually because his prices were higher and customers appreciated the whole experience. It allowed the rest of the industry to actually, they also increased their prices. They were like, oh, we have to catch up. And so that's really where that trend came from, also from naming the perfumer.
Okay. And so, as now, like kind of moving forward, what are you currently looking for that is almost like if this brand meets XYZ criteria, it's a no-brainer for me to bring them in. What are those like XYZ criteria for you?
Yeah. I think someone who just like, they have to have a reason to be like why they're making this. They have to be the authority. It can't like why are you making this? Why would anyone listen to you? And then what is their point of view? What makes this different? And I think that's what resonates, because especially not only for consumer but for retailers, you only have so much of a pie, and if you keep buying the same type of thing, it just kind of keeps eating the pie, and it doesn't benefit everyone or anyone. So that's where you want to bring something that's unique, but then not too unique, because you want people to recognize it as well. There has to be a bit of a comfort. But I think also, though, merchants really need to take risks. I feel like people are less or more risk averse these days than they were in the past. I don't think by choice. I mean, by choice, it's more like that's kind of forced upon them.
Have you created sort of like a secret sense of, you mentioned just really being passionate and having that authority and authenticity of a brand? And you probably can sense that in the process of speaking to them. Do you have multiple conversations with founders, before you decide to bring them into Scentbird, or is it more of like you're kind of doing the research on the back end?
A little of both. We definitely do the research. So, but we're happy to talk to anybody, obviously. But we know at this moment, it has to be something our customers going to appreciate, and also there has to get a value, because for us, the customers feel like they're getting a sample that is a value for them, that they can appreciate, and then once they try it, they can then invest in a full size bottle or the other size one, from the brand itself, because we offer that there can be a link that can go to the brand's website or retailer of choice. We put a QR code on like a card that goes out with every fragrance. We also do retargeted email. So we're happy to do that, but we also purchase. We also have e-commerce, so we're also able to sell it. So, but for my division, which is business development, the brand is our customer. So it's what are the brand's goals? If they want to really develop their own D2C, let's help you focus on that. If you really want to get a retailer, let's see if we can help you make that connection.
Right. Oh, that's fun.
So,
cool. I like that.
So we're a bit of a unicorn, I'd say.
Yes. Yes, I like that. So really, there is a big benefit to partnering with Scentbird in that capacity, and obviously, like you have, so many amazing connections in this space. Have you ever been wrong, Bettina? Like, for example, has there ever been a situation where, in your experience, where you're like, this brand's going to take off, it's going to be a hit, and then they like fizzled out?
Never. Just kidding. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Of course. Yeah, because we all take chances. Luckily, we don't remember those
Yeah,
as much as the successes. But yeah, that definitely happens,
yeah,
and it could be for various reasons. I think the biggest reason, at least back when I was more in the store line, it's the brand may not have the funds to support,
mm,
especially for in stores because it's so expensive to have staff or whatever it may be, or the retailer programs, and they just kind of run out of cash and they can't
yeah,
do it anymore. It's hard because you always have to have newness, you always have to be creating excitement.
mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say that, I mean, there's times, I mean, for example, we call it an early performance where we bring a brand on, and after 3 months, 4 months, we show them how the customer feels, the ratings, reviews. We share the reviews they can put on their site.
That's
But
great.
it's always insightful, especially when it's brands from other countries, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't think that. I thought this would have been the most popular, the bestseller." Or
Hmm.
or we also, even though everyone's about having a unisex fragrance, we find digitally it doesn't always translate that way. Like a true unisex has to be like, okay, male female would definitely appreciate that, totally understand it. But if it's something that leans a little female or a little male, it will get a bad rating or review because a female or a male will have a different perception of what unisex is. So
Right.
trying to educate the
That's
brand, and then when they get the reviews, they're like, okay, I said, are we okay now to move it to to the lane we think it belongs in? They're like,
right.
okay, we'll try it your way. So yeah, in that respect, when we meet, we talk about, okay, what else do you want? What other fragrances do you want to add on? How
Mhm.
can we help you?
Okay, great. And then you did touch on like funding and brands running out of funding, which I can imagine that being the case. Um, what do you share any resources with them, or in the fragrance category, have you found that there's if a founder doesn't have like VC backing, or brand doesn't have VC backing, what have been some strategies that maybe you've seen that have worked for brands or helped some brands out, to kind of raise that funding?
Sure. I mean, the funding piece, I will say that's more my founder. She's as far as Scentbird, they're very good at but more in the digital space.
Mm-hmm.
But how we help them ourselves is that the brand will supply we call it fragrance bulk, and we contribute a certain amount to it. So it's not 100% on the brand unless it's a truly big marketing initiative that we require complimentary bulk for. But we put forth all this great marketing that we kind of promise. We under promise, over deliver, and so we want to make sure that they get everything that they expect. We want brands to see the ROI and appreciate it, and so we definitely support the brand in that way. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like going back to the sampling, I mean, because if a customer can't try the fragrance, and it's not someone who's looking for that fragrance, and if you're just giving these great samples that you made that are so expensive, and you're giving them to retailers, the retailer is putting it. I mean, the retailer is great, but they're not necessarily putting it to the right person. It's hard to say who's the right
Mm-hmm.
person.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're so specialized in what we do. And there's other, great fragrance sampling resources out there, and like even like an IPSI or any of those things that give lots of
Mm-hmm.
sampling. I think they really do help brands, and I think brands should invest in that. And like, I mean, I would say definitely invest in Semper, because we can definitely help you get on the map. And for example, when I've gone to the trade shows, like Essence, I've had brands that don't even have US distribution, but they were like so happy. They were like crying that their business is up 50, 90% thanks to Scentbird, because they're like, thank you so much. Our business is up. And I was like, oh, great. Like, I'm so happy to hear that. So it's nice to see when we can help brands.
And beyond Scentbird, what are some ways that you've seen like niche brands, get funding? Is it mostly through like savings, friends and family, or are there like grants that they may be applying for? Because I know that's always a question that our audience, is looking for. It's expensive to start, and grow and keep it growing.
Yeah, I'd be honest. I'm not an expert in this. I can always get you the answers and ask
Yeah, no
some
worries.
other people. But I do know that for the brands that have gotten funded uh, in a way that they lost some of their power, they didn't really like that in the end. So I would just try to hold out from that as much as possible,
Yeah.
and as
Hmm.
much as you can do
Great
with
advice.
the, yeah, as
Great
opposed
advice.
to because you'd be like, oh, I want someone to buy us. That's great, but then you kind of lose the brand. Sometimes lose your name. I mean,
Yeah.
all those things to be
Yes, yes,
considered.
yes. So, pivoting a little bit, let's talk trends and what current trends and innovations in fragrance, can our audience be aware of, and how can they maybe leverage these trends to have a competitive edge?
Yeah, I mean, I would say gourmand has been really hot. Every
It's
type of
been hot for
gourmand.
the longest time. I feel like
I
it
know.
never stopped being hot.
I think they just find other type of ingredients. I know besides the cherry and the peach, but I think and vanilla obviously has always been the
Mhm.
hot one. But I think finding other interesting type of notes that may be unusual that you can mix with a vanilla that but still has that kind of sweetness. I think that's interesting. I've definitely been seeing more of that. Again, we're talking about the whole ouds, even though they've been around a long time, but from the beast mode to even the ones that can also be like on the sweeter side, that's definitely been still a big trend.
Hmm.
And again, the skin sense and the hair and body mist, like really really crazy. um, we also at Semper we do collaborations, and we did one recently with Sense of Wood. The founder is Fabrice Croet, who's
Yes,
wonderful. With
yes.
IFF, we did it, and that was all about neuroscience. So that was also,
Which is a huge
which is
trend
like,
in beauty in general now.
yes.
Huh.
And we did like all the testing as well as IFF had testing this show. We something one of the fragrances called uh, it was a common cedar, and it really showed how like over like 80% in these different categories that the customer felt calmer. And we did a lot of interviews on it. So it's fascinating. It was like the old aromatherapy, and how it's,
Yeah.
how do we, so it's like whatever old is new, it kind of comes back
Yeah.
around again.
Yes. And what about like functional fragrances? I feel like that was a big category. I'm curious to know if that's still a big category, or do you find that people just want a scent that kind of represents their personality at the end of the day?
Our customers just wants a scent that they enjoy, and different personalities. They like so
Hmm.
many different options, and to your point about blending together and mixing things and kind of creating their own scent. They enjoy that as well.
So what could, like, if someone, whoever, our listeners, if there's someone who's wanting to create a new fragrance brand, if you could create a new fragrance brand today that you think would like do well or take off, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think it has to be whatever that person's like passion is. Like if you and whether that's, say something that's on a more spiritual, or if it's more someone's into sports, or whatever the angle that person has that has that edge, and say, well, how do I create a fragrance that can go well with this, or
Mm,
or with boating or golfing or whatever. Also, I
yeah,
think home scents, candles have been, I think, they were very hot and trendy during COVID. Now they've
sure.
obviously slowed down quite a bit. So now it's, how do we do something more unique in the home? I think
Mm-hmm.
we also have we acquired a car freshener company called Drift, which has been
Oh,
really
cool.
tremendous. That's been a bit of a white space, so that's been really successful.
Definitely in
So
white
we see
space.
that,
Yes.
and then also how do you do home differently? So I think if you just look at something and say, how do I do something that is a little different and make people's
Mhm.
life easier? I think that's where you don't want to make it too complicated. I
Yeah.
think that's when people can appreciate something new.
Yes. I like the idea of like, for the boating culture, for the golfing, like something that's specifically some hobby or a way of life, living a lifestyle. Maybe it's like city culture. Like I had this one founder that was a graduate of one of our programs, and she created scents for professional women that wanted to sort of decompress after a full long day, especially women living in the city. And so like all the scents had this like fun sort of city names, and it was all about like decompressing and supporting your self-care, after like, if you're working woman doing a lot of things, running around, on the go. And yeah, it was a beautiful line that went into real estate locations as well. And it actually paired really nicely with like apartments, especially apartments in the city. So I definitely hear that. That's like, I wanted to put a pin in that for everyone who's listening, really looking and being introspective is what I'm hearing of what lights you up, what makes you passionate, what's your sort of areas of interest that you can niche that fragrance style to. And then you'll find your people.
Yes, you'll definitely find your audience.
Yes. And I think it's a little different than how it was before, because I don't think niching was as important years ago because there just weren't as many brands out there. Or would you say that's correct? Or
Absolutely. It's grown, but it's also the fact that everyone can now communicate with the social. People are following, and have these influencers. I mean, we have a big influencer community. So having influencers talk about your brand, and especially if you're in a certain specific category or arena, then you'll go for those influencers to talk about it, or yourself, and where you're able to really have that point of view and be out there. Where in the past you were kind of relying on, is that the right customer coming through? Is your person behind the counter speaking to it? There were so many variables.
That's right. So many variables. Now you can actually speak directly to the customer with all of the mediums.
Yes.
Speaking of mediums, are you seeing certain brands that are popping off on your site that are just really resonating with customers? What are they doing in terms of marketing? What's really working right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Parfums de Marly's it's been a minute for that, but they've been doing a beautiful product. But I think TikTok really helped them go into a different direction. That's why it's so funny when having young boys talk about Parfums de Marly. They're like, I want the bottle with the horses on it. I'm like, that's $400. Okay, yeah. we can wait on that. But I think even. Thinking of Seven Virtues, which is a brand that's sold in Sephora. Yes. Barb, she's amazing. She has a great story. She also wants to help people, being more philanthropic. So I think when there's someone who has a passion like that, and you can really see, even I'm thinking of like Brown Girl Jane. I love what they've done, and their fragrances also have a bit of that, feel good, but then also for that community. So I think really just kind of standing out and being the best. Like I would say, the best in class. Like how do I make my brand better? How do I make it better for the consumer? So I think if you're always constantly improving yourself, I think that makes a huge difference. I know I'll say. What I really learned at Barneys is that we didn't really look at competition because we just were like, let's look at what do we want? Because we knew we were like the trendsetters in a way. But it was more so.
That's cool.
What do we think is cool? What are we looking for? That's the next thing, as opposed to saying, what is everyone else doing? Okay, how do I follow that? And that's I don't think that's ever a great strategy unless that's what your business is.
Right. Of course. So what I'm hearing is pick a class, or essentially pick a niche, and then be the best in that space, in that category. Yes. And what do you think is next? What's coming up in fragrances? I know we talked about trends currently, but is there anything that you're seeing that you think or would like to see in the fragrance space?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we just came back from our leadership where we were like, brainstorming on every way to be like the world of fragrance. So we have always lots of ideas. I will say, because obviously we're subscription does really well. So if a brand, also I'm going to say, if a brand can have a subscription, that also makes a difference.
Yes, great point.
And discovery kits. I mean, we can't sell enough. I mean, people love discovery kits, and I think that's a great way for someone to really get the whole brand or most of the brand in one space where they can then really learn about it. And I think you really have to invest in the box and make it really unique and special and how that looks. I think Commodity does it really well. I think that they've done a great job on that. And also if you have something let's say I'm saying not complicated, but something that's unique, you really want to be able to kind of speak it to it several times because people don't always listen or pay attention.
Repetition. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. And what would you like to see come out in the future? Like in the next 5 to 10 years, what would be so cool?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I'd love to be able that we could, as they say, smell-o-vision, you'd be able to smell, be easy if scent came through, or, the computer, that would be amazing. Things of that nature. I do think, I said home, I know there's definitely the plugins, and we're kind of going in that category, but I think there's ways to do it, and there's also ways to do it that's clean, because you definitely don't want to do things that are toxic. I know that's been a big controversy about candles, even if you do a clean candle. So being conscious of the environment and your health, because you want to make sure that's all considered. Because in the past, I know I was I'd say one of the first, but I definitely launched organic skincare and organic fragrance back in, I want to say, 2007, 2008. It was a bit early because people didn't appreciate it. They appreciate eating organic, but they didn't appreciate it on their skin. But it's the fragrances definitely improve, and the carriers and the naturals, like Douglas Little from Heretic. He does a beautiful job with his fragrances. He just launched a bug spray that I will tell you really works. And it's gorgeous. I mean, it's $45, but it's all natural essential oils, and you don't get eaten, and it can be your fragrance. So I think it's just looking at how do you do something that's good for everyone and just do it better.
I love the example of the bug spray, because I'm seeing a few brands doing that. And they're just re-innovated. It's like a whole new category that's being innovated, which is cool. One of the things I'm kind of excited by or considering is scents that are at a specific location or a club, for example. I know Soho House, for example, has their signature scent that's really, really lovely, and it's and then you want to bring that home, So I know that's been done for a while, but it'd be cool if there was more of an access to those scents. So for people who may not be able to go to that place, they may know about it, but they might not be able to go to that place, or they know about some sort of club or specific spa or something or something quintessential can have access by scent to.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, the one hotel they did that with they did it with, I think, Aroma 360, their fragrances. Yes. And Baccarat started out, from MFK, being at the Baccarat Hotel. That's where he made it. Francis made it for
There's
the hotel
also
itself.
I think the Fontainebleau also has this very quintessential, in Miami, very quintessential scent that is just orange blossomy and sweet, but also just lovely. So it's being able to have access to that scent might be cool. And I know you mentioned Parfum de Marly, and that's my favorite scent right now is the Delina scent, which is just, have you had that? Have you tried that yet?
Yeah, all three Delinas, and I like the Delina Rosé. There's also really pretty. Yeah.
Yes, I just absolutely love their scents. They have that newer one for men that came out. It starts with, I think, a V. It's a dark green bottle. It's just maybe it starts with an alpha.
It's not Leighton. I have to remember.
Leighton,
it's different.
There's that
Leighton.
one. It might be that one. It might be that one. Do you guys see a lot of sales of Parfum de Marly, or?
Oh yeah, Parfum de. It's hard to keep them on the site.
Really?
And Creed,
wow.
And Creed as well. I mean, people love Creed, and I love their Carmina, their newer fragrance. It's really beautiful. It's also a beautiful brand, House of Beau. I don't know if you're familiar with their founder, but they're gorgeous. And
look it up.
It's funny because I have some of my bottles, but you can see the bottle is has this beautiful crystal, really really well done.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's they lovely. Do they have one called Rosario. I mean, they're sold in more like a Neiman's, Bergdorf type of environment, but. Their founders are from Mexico, and so they definitely went after the Mexican roots and trying to find
That's
the
cool.
resources for it, but really beautifully done. But then you also have, you talk about DS and Durga. I love his like steam rainbow, which is like kind of like a fun scent right now. It's really
Ooh,
like kind
that's
of light
fun.
and
That
like
looks
you can
fun.
layer it. Yeah,
I
there's
want
so
to
many.
try.
I just it's fun to. I mean, you have to love I have to love what you do because I get so many fragrances every day
Yeah.
sent to me.
Yes. Speaking of so many scents being sent to you, I have one more question. But how can those who are listening, who may have a fragrance brand or maybe launching a fragrance brand, what would be sort of like the best process to work with Scentbird if that's something that they're interested in pursuing?
Yeah. Well, they can email me at Bettina O'Neill at Scentbird.com, and we can set up an appointment to talk to myself or someone on my team and walk them through the process, and they can see if it makes sense for them or if it's right for them. But I find we're such a unicorn, as I said, we're so unique that really we show all that we do in the process, and we're a longer play, and it takes a few months. Like by the time we receive the bulk, it takes a few months until we get you on the
Of
site.
course.
So it's not like
Of course.
immediate. And you'll find initially when people are sampling the fragrance, you'll see it more on your social. Like you'll see all of a sudden people are asking or looking or on your site. And when you ask, they'll say, "Oh, it's Scentbird." So we're definitely a bit more organic, even though we also include the
Mm.
QR codes. People
Yeah.
shop. They want to shop. They're not just going to follow a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And what is there any advice that you would give for those, fragrance founders who are in those early stages of their business and looking to really make a significant impact on the market? Any advice that you would give them? Like if
I
you're,
would think
if your best friend was launching a fragrance brand, like what advice would you give her?
I would think like, who is your customer? Like, who are you making this
Mm-hmm.
for? And
Yes.
then, like, for example, if it's and based upon that, because the price point matters, especially in a store. So if it seems to be more of a Sephora type fit, um, it's not easy to get into Sephora, but you kind of like, okay, what else is there? If that's your goal, what else do they have? What seems to be trending well?
Yes.
And then from there, not that you want to copy, but you want to see, okay, you understand this price range or this type of look, packaging wise, you can see how that fits. But same time, I said, be true to yourself. I think if you're unique and you have a different voice, and then people start talking to you about it, and they'll talk about more again, this more of this organic PR, so to speak, because no one really advertises anymore, except like we do with like Facebook, etc., TikTok and
Hmm.
Instagram and YouTube. But it really is. People want to hear what real people are saying.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you find that the founder has to be in a way front and center, or are there brands that you work with or have worked with more recently that can be behind the scenes?
I think it's better if they're at least visible, like people are aware of them, and they also have to have their their point of view or their DNA put in there.
Mm,
Doesn't mean they have to be like on QVC doing the infomercials or whatever if they don't want to do that. But I think definitely talking about it and having some clips like that, because people want to hear like, well, what made you do this? What is your
right.
passion? And not only on whatever video, but I know in the stores, I remember that was one of the big selling features for the staff. It was like, well, so and so, like Serge Lutton was here and he was talking about why he made this or has like these interesting stories, and that also just adds to the whole appeal. And if you think about fragrance, I mean, you don't need it. It's not. It's. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes your life better. It's something,
Yes.
but it enhances your life, and you're like, okay, why do I need this scent?
I love that you touched on that because it is something you don't need. And one of the things with like skincare and hair care and why it might be easier to sell is because there's the features and the benefits, right?
Yes.
Here are the different ingredients, here are the, botanicals or actives, and here's what they do, for example. But with fragrance, it's very much emotional. So, what do you find that allows you to, sell a fragrance emotion? Is it really a lot of what you already talked about, which is like, is it the visual of the brand and the packaging, the founder combo, obviously the scents themselves, but there's got to be something that kind of draws them in the first place, right?
Very true. And it's interesting when it made me remember this. I think we had so much learning during the whole COVID lockdown time period, was that we realized, because fragrance went up besides candles. I mean, our subscriptions also went through the roof, but it was amazing because you're thinking, well, people are home. We know, the heels and the handbags, that market kind of went to the wayside a bit. People were kind of
Right.
getting comfortable, casual, wearing sneakers, etc. But fragrance was up because people were, and it means they weren't buying it for other people. They were buying it for themselves. They were like, it was to make them feel better. And it was like, okay,
Mm.
this is truly, I mean, I'm not saying they
Emotion.
still don't buy gifts for people or think about, date night, but it really had to be, this is going to give me this little lift.
Yeah.
When things are rough, it's going to give me this little bit of joy. And I think that was really interesting to see.
Yes. I mean, I know that like with fragrance for me, they were, you wear certain fragrances because they make you feel, more confident or more powerful or more outspoken or more fun or whatever it is. Like with every scent, it helps you craft the personality that you want to be that day. And it definitely seems like that's what the direction that fragrance has taken, and why so many people have such large collections of fragrances, because their personalities, they want to represent the different facets of their personality.
And it
Highlight.
changes throughout the day. They want to they spray all day long, and it's interesting to hear. I do that too. I think that all works. Like, even you're talking about that. Like, I was saying, the Carmina Creed. I love that for, like, if you want to present in front of somebody and you want to, like, be powerful,
Ooh,
so you kind of think about what's your thing. And I also love, like, an everyday. I always have trouble with this name. Etat Libre Orange, but this fragrance is like this
yes,
really true, like, green,
yes.
fresh unisex. So I love layering everything.
Yes. No, I love that you're sharing some of these favorites, some of these scents and like your go-tos. Are there any amazing pop-ups happening or that are happening in New York City right now or in the coming months?
Well, I know some, like, interesting stores. I know Commodities opening their first store, so that's
Very
kind of
cool.
cool. So, and
Okay.
they're all about the space. Like, there's your scent space. Deciding if you want personal or, but I think one is the one, one's stronger, so you can have the fragrance and have three different levels based upon
Hmm.
how much fragrance you want to have. So I think that's very interesting. There are a few pop-ups that are coming up. I don't know if I can talk about some of them yet because they're kind of quiet, but I know we're looking to do some in the fall too. We want to try that.
That's exciting. Super cool. Well, to wrap this up, I'd love to end, this episode on probably the number one question that people maybe are wondering is, what is your signature scent? I know you try a lot of different scents and you're layering and all the things, but is there one scent, like a go-to, that you've always loved?
That's a great question. I mean, for the longest time, I love Byredo's Belfrique, because it's like that
Hmm.
citrusy, and Frederick Malle, Portrait of a Lady. That's just a
Mm,
gorgeous,
yes, I love that scent.
scent when you just want to have that type of scent. But like a new, so I think a new thing is, like, who I launched him years ago, Uli Lang. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I launched him at Barneys like
Really
20
lame.
years ago.
Yes, I know. I know that
So
brand.
he
Yeah.
has a sun crest, which is gorgeous. It's definitely, it's more like this peach, and it's like you just feel so alive, and you feel like
Hmm.
vibrant. So I think it so much depends on what you want to feel, and then the season. So I um I'm a bit fickle, but I love them all.
I love them all. I love that. I used to not love gourmand scents. I was definitely not a vanilla scent, but I'm finding, I don't know, recently I'm enjoying like even the Sol de Janeiro, like their
That's
scent
very hot
profile,
right now.
it's just so good. Like that base, and I know they've created so many different variations of it, but I use it as like a body wash. And it's just, there's something about it that is so good. And then one other one that I am really enjoying, I just recently, more recently got a sampler set of Veronique Gabai scents.
I love Veronique. Yeah.
Yes. We actually worked together as well. And she, like, I love like, they're so summery and they just remind you of the French Riviera, and they're very, like, bright. Like it's definitely like that scent that you're wearing to the beach or on like a warm night out, and the warmth just, expands those scents even more. But yes, love all the ones that you mentioned as well.
I love her Ready for Rosé. That's my favorite.
Yes,
The
Ready for
newest
Rosé.
one. But she also did like the Eau de Vert and Eau de Jour, which are great because talking about having like that scent that you can mix with everything, and then also have the lotions that go with it. Those two
Yes.
scents, so which is
Yes.
smart.
And those are so great. Like the body care is always so nice, because if you're not looking to be overpowering, or you're not in, you can't be in an environment where you're wearing a lot of fragrance, you can wear that instead. And it just kind of sits a little bit more on the skin versus,
Yes.
a scent that's like permeating as the day goes on. So this has been great, Bettina. Thank you. Thank you for joining me here and sharing your love of fragrance and your love of also expanding niche brands, indie brands, getting them out for people to find and learn about and buy. What a fun session,
Well,
and
thank
I
you.
appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been tremendous fun. So we have to get together and have a smelling session in person.
Yes, and please let me know if you do open up something more in person. I would love
Absolutely.
to come and try out all the things that you're going to curate. I know you'll curate an amazing collection for the space. So
absolutely, will do.
Looking forward to it. And thank you everyone for listening. And we are out for now. See you on the next episode.